What's up? Greetings from Houston, Texas. Mike coming at you from AT Astro, Area of Truth, Aspect and Predictive Astrology. And today I will be continuing this series of videos that I'm making focusing on a particular area of astrology that I'm particularly good at, I like a lot, I'm passionate about, and that is predictive astrology. And predictive astrology is, in my opinion, one of the more potent ways to use astrology to kind of predict the timing of certain events or certain changes that you're going to be going through or another individual is going to be going through, just depending on, you know, what you want to look up or what you want to see. It's tricky, though. Predictive astrology is very complex. It requires using a lot of different methods and playing them against each other. But over the years of me checking out things and using these different methods, I have a method that's worked pretty well for me. And it's a method that I've sort of come across on my own. I developed it on my own. And other astrologers use it too. I've never seen anybody really lay it out in a way that anybody can comprehensively understand. So I'll sort of kind of begin going over it today. This is part one of predictive astrology. So the main methods for predictive astrology, the main types of charts you're going to be using are, there's transits, and most people who know a little bit about astrology know a bit about transits. You're going to be looking at solar arcs, you're going to be looking at progressions, and you're going to be looking at solar returns and lunar returns. You want to play them all against each other. But when I'm trying to figure out where the main areas of action are going to be for somebody in a particular time frame, I usually start with the solar return. What the solar return is it's a chart that you cast every year for a person at the time that the sun reaches the spot it was at the moment that person was born. It's usually right around their birthday, a day before, a day after, or the day of. And when you cast that chart, you can sort of get a good view of the energies that are going to be, you know, transpiring or that are going to be in focus for that person for that year. The first thing you do is you cast the solar return. You can use astro.com or however you want to use it, or whatever software you want to use. Just astro.com is the easiest, and they also have the options for using all the other different types of charts that I talked about just a couple seconds ago. So that's just what I've usually stuck with. You look at the solar return. You see where the ascendant is at on the solar return. And you find out where in that person's natal chart that ascendant falls. So, for instance, in my solar return this year, it falls at, I think, 7 degrees Aquarius, or 7 degrees Sagittarius. So, in my natal chart, that falls in the 7th house, which means that the 7th house is going to be activated. So, whatever house the solar return ascendant falls in on your natal chart, that house will be activated. That's where most of the action's going to be for that year. That's where the most significant events are going to take place. You take a look at that, and then also look at the planetary ruler of the solar return. So in my instance, it would be Sagittarius, so Jupiter. You want to look at transits from Jupiter to the natal chart, and sometimes to the progress chart as well. So that's going to cue you into what to start paying attention for. You look at where the sun falls on the solar return. You look at what aspects it's making, what house it falls in. You look at the sign and the house that the moon falls in and what aspects it's making. You also look at the chart ruler of the solar return. And you find out what house it falls in, what aspects are being made to it. So I'll do a video on solar returns in depth. I'm already doing a video on the solar return sun in different houses to kind of go into that a little bit more. But that's basically where you start to kind of figure out where the action's going to be happening for somebody. You start with the solar return. Like, okay, what's going on in the 7th house this year? Because that automatically, where the ascendant falling in the solar return and, you know, corresponding to the natal chart house, it's a good starting point. So you take a look at the natal chart, and then you start pulling up transits, and you start seeing where the slower moving planets are going. Those are big. Transits, people want to pay attention to where the moon's at. Oh, the moon's in, the moon's in Pisces. How are you feeling today? Well, I'm certainly not feeling like a fucking Pisces moon, but the slower moving planets in transit. I'm talking about Mars to an extent, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, but Pluto moves slow, but Pluto changing houses or hitting an angle on your natal chart is very significant. And it's one of those things that only happens most people will only have it like happen once or twice with it hitting an angle, but it's very significant. Also, if, let's say, the solar return ascendant falls in a sign that's ruled by a faster moving planet like Mercury or even the moon, that means that, you need to pay attention to those personal planets in transit as well, because they'll be significant. Also, like, let's say the ascendant falls in Cancer on the solar return, that means the moon's transits are going to be very, very much heightened, which also could show a year, relatively emotional year for you. Not necessarily a bad year, but with you being much more in tune with the ebbs and flows of the moon, because the moon, it waxes, it wanes, it empties, it fills, so you're going to have kind of a wavy sort of year emotionally. Once you start checking out what the transits are doing in correspondence to what the solar return's doing, you can check for major events, like progressions in solar arcs are going to signal major events, major shifts. And if you look for a couple things on the solar return or the lunar, or on the solar arc or the progression, then you can start to looking for when those aspects become exact. Then you can start honing in on when these big events are going to be happening. So I'm going to use an example of how I tie these charts in together to get a synopsis of what's going to be going down. So I know somebody, he's a case study. I've been studying his chart for a little while. I cast his solar return. The solar return ascendant fell in his natal 7th house. So, boom. We've got the 7th house in focus this year. Now, there's a lot of other stuff going on in the solar return, but this cued me in to kind of figure out what's going on with the 7th house. When is this? What's the action that's going to be taking place, and when is it going to happen? Well, you check over to his natal chart. You look at the transits. I saw in his transits that Uranus was about to hit his descendant, coming very close. So that in itself, Uranus is the planet of, its instability, its sudden changes. It's, my mom got, divorced my dad whenever Uranus was transiting her 7th house. So that cued me in to, you want to find out when that transit's going to be exact. The Uranus is about to hit the descendant in a couple months. So I found out, in fact, a fast way you can get a software where you can scroll through transits to make it happen faster. But a lot of times, if I'm looking to find out when a planet's going to hit a certain degree, I'll use an ephemeris. I'm a little bit old school in that way. I actually still can draw out natal charts by hand. I do use ephemerises to track transits. It makes my life a lot easier, because you can flip through all these tables, you can find a certain date, and you can just start kind of zipping through day by day by day by day to find out when an aspect becomes exact. All right, so found out that during the course of this individual solar return, with the 7th house being heightened and Uranus drawing close to the descendant, I looked for the exact day when Uranus hits the descendant. Boom, it's in the middle of April this coming year. All right, stay with me. I then pulled up his progressions. And in the progressions, major events, huge life-changing events or shifts in energy are going to be usually symbolized by the moon changing sign, the sun changing sign, the ascendant changing sign, the moon being in complete opposition to the sun in the progressed chart, a progressed full moon, and the moon being in conjunction to the sun in the progressed, so the progressed new moon. The new moon, when the progressed sun and moon are conjunct, this happens once every 28 years, that signals a big start, like a big shift. You decide to take a whole new, course of action. It might not be easy, not necessarily a good thing, but it's like a new beginning. And then the full moon, the progressed full moon, which happens about 12 years later, that shows like the culmination of everything that was started and began during the progressed new moon. So it's a 28-year cycle. It takes the sun about 30 years to transit from sign to sign, to progress from one sign into the next in the progress chart. But it takes the moon about 28 years to go all the way around, and it'll change sign and it'll change house, and you'll feel the effects at an emotional level, depending on when the sun begins to change sign, or when the moon changes sign, or when it changes house. It just brings different areas into focus for your life. But when the sun changes signs, or when the ascendant changes signs, those are huge shifts in your personality. So what I found was, when I looked at the date that Uranus became conjunct exactly this person's descendant, I looked at the progressions, and on that exact day, his ascendant was changing signs, or will be changing signs, from Scorpio into Sagittarius. So Uranus and Sagittarius, they have a common theme, and that is freedom, expansion. I mean, granted, they're a little bit different, but both of those imply a breaking free, or a change in the consciousness that allows for somebody to break free from something. This person happens to be in a 10-year relationship. And also, I'm not even going to comment on that person's relationship, because I'm just going to keep my opinions to myself on that. But we see that there's definitely something going down around that period of time, about April, with the ascendant changing sign, the 7th house being in play in the solar return, and then Uranus hitting the descendant, which means change. And then we moved on to the solar arcs. And in the solar arc, I noticed Neptune coming conjunct the IC, and solar arc north node becoming conjunct the descendant, which adds a whole nother layer to the story that I'm starting to kind of piece together for what this person's going to go through. So to me, you see, okay, well, the descendant's falling on the Uranus is falling on the descendant, so that's some sort of break. Any slow-moving planet hitting a descendant, or hitting an angle, the ascendant, the IC, the descendant, the midhaven, that's significant. So you always pay attention for that. And then you want to find out what's going on with the other transits right around the time that it becomes exact, because that's going to start showing you where things are, starting to transpire. Something's transpiring for this person, because those four points, the 4 angles, those are periods of time where you're really interacting with the world. So we checked out the solar arc directions, and what a solar arc is you take somebody's natal chart, and then it's kind of like you hold the natal chart in place, and then the solar arc directions is you take all the other planets, and for each year they move 1 degree in step. They all move at the same speed, so it's like every year. And when you see different planets coming conjunct, like you see a solar arc planet coming conjunct a natal planet, then you see these are usually signifying big events. A lot of times, like Pluto coming conjunct, or solar arc Pluto coming conjunct the natal ascendant, a lot of times that can mean death. Or Saturn Pluto coming conjunct, that can mean death too, but it just depends. Death are huge changes. Solar arc directions are very telling. Or relationships that totally fuck you up, like in one of my solar arc directions, where I had what was it, Pluto, transit Pluto come conjunct, transit Venus and Pluto, one after another, come conjunct my Mars, which really fucked me up bad. It was just basically a year down the toilet, where I was completely just embroiled in obsession, and it was bad, and addiction. Anyway, so we had solar arc Neptune hitting this person's IC, the home life. And Neptune, with the nature of Neptune, it dissolves and breaks apart. And then we have the North Node, which is all about, I wouldn't say life path. Let's see, when you look at the North Node, South Node in a natal chart, it's all about your karmic path, but it's a kind of an obsessive point. So when you look at it in predictive astrology, it's sort of like when transit or solar arc or progressed North Node or whatever, a planet comes conjunct it, or vice versa, it creates a situation to where you're flung. It's magnetic. You can't really control it. It's like kicking and screaming. You're flung in a certain direction. So Neptune coming conjunct the IC in the solar arc shows a dissolution of the home life. Because IC is related to the home, where you live, where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe. And then the North Node coming conjunct the IC, or the descendant in the solar arc, shows some sort of fated encounter, fated relationship. So this, to me, and we're going to play this out, I'm pretty sure I'm right, though, just because of what I know about this person. A sort of relationship a new relationship. One that comes out of the blue, and then one that literally destroys everything about his previous relationship that he's been in for over a decade. It's very telling. I mean, granted, I'm going to have to take a little while to really see how this plays out, but I'm pretty positive. And this is my method for coming to these conclusions. You're taking these different charts and you're putting them together. You're finding a theme, and then you're honing in on that area of life and finding out where the action's going on related to that house or the planet that rules that house. And it's, you know, I get kind of mad scientist about it. I really, you know, I'm like, what's going to happen? And I see all this going down. And these planets, when you look at the different charts, they tell a story. And then, boom, right as I was starting to put this together, I pulled up a lunar return. And a lunar return is just like a solar return, but it's cast for the moment the moon comes at the spot it was at on the day you were born, or the moment you were born. And I pulled up the lunar return for that month where all these aspects were coming exact. And then, boom, Pluto on the descendant for the lunar return of that month. And that just solidified everything. Because Pluto, it just destroys. And it's sitting exactly on the descendant for this person. So we're looking at something big. So it's just a quick glimpse into my thought process of how I deal with predictive astrology. And I'm gonna piece things out more. I'm gonna do a video on solar arcs. I'm gonna do a video on solar and lunar returns specifically, and more in depth. I have a sub-series of videos related to solar returns. And transits, I need to focus on a little bit more, so I will be putting out some videos related to transits. And like I said, it's an interesting topic. It's really difficult, but it's like it tells a story. These planets, they tell a story. And if you can really start to piece things together and be a little investigative with what's going on in your progressions, your transits, your solar returns, you can really kind of figure out like what's going to happen this year. It's you know, it's like a soap opera with planets. So I hope this was helpful. I do offer consultations. I do specialize. I'm very good at relationship astrology and predictive astrology. I can read all types of charts. So just feel free to get a hold of me through my email. I'll post the link below. Subscribe to my channel, please. And you can also contact me on my personal Facebook profile, Dennis Michael Ward. So yeah, until next time, guys. Thank you.